Welcome to all the listeners of the Deep Night. You are listening to True Horror Vault. In this podcast, we bring you horrifying accounts inspired by real human claims, local folklore, and mysterious phenomena passed down over the years. Tonight marks the beginning of our brand new series, True Encounters from the Top 5 Most Haunted Cemeteries in America. In the light of day, a cemetery may seem like a peaceful place, but when the last person leaves after midnight, when the wind dies down, and all you hear among the thousands of tombstones is the sound of your own footsteps. What truly hides within that silence is a question perhaps no one once answered. Tonight's first story was sent to us by an expatriate listener who preferred to remain anonymous. The incident took place in one of America's most talked about burial grounds, St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 in New Orleans. To this day, he believes he was not alone in that cemetery. Story 1. The Tombstone That Knew My Name. This happened about 4 years ago. I was in New Orleans working with a documentary crew. After shooting wrapped up, a sudden urge came over me. For years, I had heard that St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 was one of the most mysterious cemeteries in America. During the day, it's packed with tourists. But after the sun sets, even the locals avoid the surrounding area. Curiosity wouldn't let me sit still. With special permission, I entered the cemetery grounds after dusk. Stepping inside felt like crossing into a different world. Row after row of ancient tombs. Many bore century-old weathering. Broken stone here, dried up flowers there. A damp, heavy smell hung in the air. I turned on my camera. For the first half hour, nothing unusual happened. Just the occasional caw of a crow in the distance and the sound of my own footsteps. Then, just a few minutes after midnight, my camera battery instantly dropped to 0. I was baffled because I had fully charged it before leaving. I pulled out my phone. Its screen flickered and shut down by itself too. I realized something was wrong. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. As I took a step forward, a tombstone to my right caught my eye. The strange thing was, it hadn't been there just a few seconds ago. I was certain of it, because I had walked down this exact path moments earlier. I wiped the accumulated dust off the stone to read the inscription. What I saw made my heart stop. Carved onto the stone was my own name. My full name. Not a single letter misspelled. Below it was a date. It was tomorrow's date. I stumbled back a few paces in terror, trying to convince myself it was a sick prank. But no one here was supposed to know my name. I shone my flashlight on it. At that exact moment, a dark shadow slowly passed across the face of the tombstone. Yet, there was no one around. My breathing grew heavy. I decided to get out of there immediately. I started walking back along the exact path I had entered through. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, yet I couldn't find the iron gate anywhere. Instead, I kept looping back to the exact same tomb. Every single time, the same name stared back at me. My own name. At first, I thought it was just the echo of my own footsteps. But after a moment, I realized, no. Even when I stopped, the other footsteps took 2 more paces. Tap, tap. Then absolute silence. A chill ran through my entire body. Suddenly, someone whispered very softly, right beside my ear. "You're too late." I spun around. No one was there, just rows of silent tombs, shrouded in thick darkness. I began to run. As I ran blindly, I suddenly saw an old man standing ahead. He wore a dark coat and held an antique lantern. Gasping for breath, I yelled, "Where is the gate? I need to get out." The old man looked at me and said in a calm, flat voice, "A name that has already been written cannot leave so easily." I didn't stay another second. I darted past him. Suddenly, my foot slipped and I fell hard to the ground. Reaching down to push myself up, I felt my hand land not on hard stone, but on someone's ice-cold fingers. I yanked my hand back in pure panic. I flashed my light toward the ground and saw a pale, emaciated skeletal hand slowly retreating back into the crack beneath the stone. Without thinking, I ran with every ounce of strength I had left. A few seconds later, the iron gate suddenly appeared right in front of me. I burst out and collapsed to my knees outside. I didn't go anywhere else until morning. The next day, gathering my courage, I returned to the cemetery in broad daylight. In the spot where I had seen the tombstone with my name, there was no such tomb at all. One of the cemetery workers listened to my story and remained silent for a long time. Then he spoke softly. Many people say, at night, certain tombs appear in this graveyard that can never be found in the light of day. I asked, and what does it mean to see your own name on one? He looked me straight in the eye and simply said, if someone truly sees their own name, then they are very lucky, because most people never return to tell anyone about it. Dear listeners, even after the story of that New Orleans cemetery ends, one question lingers. If a tombstone truly writes down a future name, can that name ever be erased? Or, once written, is no human ever able to change their fate? Now, we move on to another notorious haunted cemetery, in America. A place where many claim that once night falls, the sound of a child weeping drifts through the air. And among those who followed that sound, many never returned the same again. Story 2. The child who wanted to show me his grave. This happened at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois. I had heard about this graveyard many times. People said that strange shadow figures were seen here in the middle of the night. Some had seen an old phantom car. Some had seen a woman in black. And others, a little child. Back then I made videos about paranormal phenomena. One night, equipped with a camera, a tripod, and a high-powered flashlight, I entered the cemetery alone. An eerie silence hung over everything. Only the branches of ancient trees swayed in the wind. My flashlight beam danced across tombstone after tombstone. Most of the inscriptions had been worn away by time. I was talking to the camera as I moved deeper inside. Right then, I spotted a small white figure in the distance. At first I thought maybe it was a lost child. I called out, "Hey, what are you doing here?" No answer. The child just stood there. I slowly walked closer. The nearer I got, the more I realized he wasn't moving. He wasn't making a sound either. When I reached just a few feet away, the child slowly raised his head and looked at me. My heart froze. His eyes were completely black. No white part whatsoever. And on his face was a bizarre, unnatural smile. Suddenly, he raised his small hand and gestured to me, as if saying, "Come with me." I don't know why, but I felt an irresistible urge to follow him. He started walking, and I stayed a few paces behind. We moved deep into the maze of graves. The cemetery felt endless. Suddenly, the child stopped in front of an old, broken tomb and pointed down. I shone my flashlight. Carved into the stone was Elias, age 7. At that exact moment, a low voice whispered right beside my ear, "That's not mine." I gasped and looked around. The child was still standing right in front of me, but his lips hadn't moved. So who had spoken? I backed away a few steps. Suddenly, the surrounding air became unnaturally cold. My breath billowed out like smoke. Then, the sound of multiple children laughing echoed simultaneously around me. Yet there wasn't a single person in sight. I swung my flashlight around, and beside every single grave stood small, dark silhouettes. None of them moved. They were all just staring at me. My hands trembled violently. I tried to run for the exit. But no matter which direction I ran, I kept ending up back in front of that same broken tomb. The child was still standing there. This time, he said very softly, "You're looking at the wrong grave." Then, he pointed his tiny hand toward a nearby bush. I pointed my light into the brush and saw another old tombstone buried halfway under the dirt. I brushed the soil away to read it. The writing was nearly gone, but one line remained clear. Name unknown. My body shuddered. Right then, I heard the sound of many small footsteps behind me. I slowly turned around, and what I saw, I can never forget. Standing among the graves were at least 20 children. All wore old white clothes. All had the same pitch-black eyes. None of them spoke. They just stared at me together. As I backed away in terror, they all raised their hands at once, as if inviting me to join them. Right then, the glare of car headlights cut through the cemetery trees. The moment the light hit the area, everything vanished. The children were gone. The first child was gone. It was just me, standing alone. I later found out that a park security officer on patrol had spotted me and pulled me out of the graveyard. After hearing my story, he let out a long sigh and said, "You're lucky." "Why?" I asked. He replied in a quiet tone, "Many years ago, an unmarked child's grave was found here. No one knows who he was. But every now and then, They say he goes looking for someone to help him find his grave. I never returned to that cemetery. But to this day, if I hear a child crying anywhere deep in the night, I never, ever walk toward the sound. Dear listeners, some cemeteries are not just resting places for the dead. Time itself seems to stand still within them. Tonight's next story comes from another of America's most famous haunted grounds, a place where for decades, countless people have reported seeing a mysterious woman in black after nightfall. I don't know if you believe in ghosts, but after this incident, I never stepped into a cemetery after sunset again. Story 3. The Woman in Black. This happened on an autumn night near Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. My friend Daniel and I used to make documentaries about paranormal locations. It was around 1 a.m. The moonlight was swallowed by heavy clouds. We had only 2 flashlights and a camera. The moment we stepped inside the cemetery, an unusually cold gust of wind washed over us. Daniel joked, "If we're going to see something tonight, I hope we catch it on camera." I laughed in response, but that laugh didn't last long. In the distance, standing beside an old tomb, was a woman. Long black dress, head bowed, long black hair covering her face. She was completely still. I thought she might be a visitor. I called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" No response. We took a few steps closer. Right then, the woman slowly raised her head. Through the strands of her hair, half of her face was visible. Her eyes were unnaturally pale. She wasn't looking at us. She was looking right behind us. My stomach dropped. Daniel whispered, "Don't look back," but I couldn't control myself. I slowly turned around. There was no one there. When I looked back front, the woman was gone too. We stared at each other. Right then, the camera started recording on its own. What showed on the screen wasn't there in real life. In the camera's viewfinder, the woman in black was standing right between us. But with the naked eye, no one was there. Daniel's hands began to shake. As he lowered the camera, a female voice drifted softly through the air. "Leave." We broke into a run. But no matter how many times we ran toward the gate, we kept ending up back in front of the exact same tomb. Then, we saw the woman again in the distance. This time she slowly raised her arm, her finger pointing straight at an old tombstone. I don't know what drove me, but I stepped closer. A thick layer of dust covered the stone. As I wiped it away with my hand, a name emerged. And right below it was an old black and white photograph. I froze. The woman in the photograph was the exact same person. Suddenly, I felt an ice-cold breath on my ear. I spun around. No one was there. But a dried rose resting on the tomb slowly rolled toward my feet on its own. Daniel screamed, "Get out now!" We ran with everything we had, finally bursting through the cemetery gates. The next day when we checked the video footage, our blood ran cold. In multiple frames of the video, the woman in black could be clearly seen standing behind the 2 of us. But the strangest thing of all was, in the final few seconds, she looked directly into the camera lens and smiled very slowly. We never released that footage. Even now, whenever I boot up that old hard drive late at night, the video file name pops up on the screen by itself. But I never open it. Host, dear listeners, if you see a stranger in a cemetery, it might be called a coincidence. If you see 2, it could be a mistake. But what if from among century-old graves, you feel a presence that knows your name, knows your past, and even knows your deepest, most secret fear? Tonight's story took place in one of the most famous cemeteries in American history, Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York. Many know this place simply as a historic landmark. But after the sun goes down, how terrifying that silence can become is something I have witnessed with my own eyes. Story 4. The grave where I lost my shadow. This happened on a cold October night. I was conducting research on supernatural folklore and had heard about Sleepy Hollow Cemetery countless times. Locals used to say, after midnight, if you stand beside certain graves, your shadow won't belong to you anymore. I didn't believe any of it. Armed with a camera, a flashlight, and a voice recorder, I went in alone. Towering oak trees lined the paths amidst thick fog. Moonlight cast strange, distorted shadows off the gravestones. For the first half hour, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. I snapped photos of various graves. Suddenly, as my flashlight beam hit an old tombstone, I noticed something strange. My shadow was cast in front of me. But there was a second shadow beside mine. Tall, unnaturally thin. The head looked human, but the neck was bent at an impossible angle. I quickly turned around. No one was there. When I looked back front, the second shadow was gone too. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of light and shadow. Right then, my voice recorder turned on by itself. A faint voice came through the speaker. "You arrived late." I froze. Nobody had spoken that out loud. I reached to turn the recorder off, but it played again on its own. "Leave your shadow with me." My throat went completely dry. I started walking fast to find the exit. But after a few steps, I realized my shadow was no longer casting on the ground. The flashlight beam was there. The shadows of trees were there. The shadows of gravestones were there. Only my shadow was missing. Panicked, I darted my light in every direction. Suddenly, about 50 yards away, I saw my own shadow standing. Yes, my own shadow. But it wasn't on the ground. It was standing flat against the surface of an old tombstone. And it was slowly waving its hand, motioning for me to come. My heart pounded against my ribs. I closed my eyes and stood still for a few seconds. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. Right then, an ice-cold touch landed on my shoulder. I spun around. An old man stood there. Long black coat, his face obscured by the fog. He said in a quiet voice, "What is lost? Do not go looking for." The moment he said it, he dissolved into the fog. I didn't wait another second. I sprinted out through the cemetery gates. The next morning, as I stood in front of the hotel mirror combing my hair, I suddenly noticed the sunlight was shining directly on me. Yet, while my reflection was in the mirror, there was no shadow on the floor. It took nearly 5 minutes for my shadow to slowly creep back. To this day, I don't know what really happened then. But ever since, whenever I stand in a deserted place, I don't check my surroundings first. I check to see if my shadow is still with me. Dear listeners, tonight's final story is perhaps the most unsettling, because regarding this cemetery, there are not just local legends, but decades of eyewitness accounts. Tonight's story is based on an incident inspired by a very old cemetery in Virginia, Burtville Cemetery. This story was sent in by one of our expatriate listeners. One line he wrote remains etched in my mind to this day. "We know what lies inside the graves, but what wanders outside them all night, no one knows." Story 5. Waiting beside the last grave. I had traveled to the US to shoot a documentary on old burial grounds. An elderly local man warned me before I went. If you walk toward the last row of graves after midnight, and someone calls your name, do not look back. I brushed it off as superstition. That night at exactly 12:17 a.m., I stepped into the cemetery. An eerie silence hung over the grounds, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. I switched on my light and walked toward the last row of tombs. Suddenly, the wind died down completely. Not a single leaf moved. Right then, a very familiar voice called out from behind me. "Hey, wait." It was my father's voice. My father had passed away many years ago. Tears welled up in my eyes. For a split second, I wanted to turn around. Then I remembered the old man's warning. I didn't look back. I kept walking forward, but the voice came closer this time. "I'm all alone. Just turn around once." My whole body trembled. I closed my eyes and kept walking. Suddenly, my flashlight died. Total darkness enveloped me. At that moment, someone placed a hand on my shoulder very gently. It was cold as ice. I couldn't hold back anymore. I slowly turned around. The figure standing there was not my father. It wasn't human. A towering 7-foot-tall dark shadow. Where its face should have been was a void of darkness, holding 2 pale white eyes and 2 unnaturally long arms. It slowly tilted its head, and in my father's voice, it whispered, "I told you. Don't look back." I ran for my life. Behind me, I could hear heavy thundering footsteps. Thud, 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 as if something massive was pursuing me. I reached the gate and threw myself outside. At that exact instant, all noise ceased. Panting heavily, I looked back through the iron bars. Standing beside the last grave in the final row was that tall, black silhouette, frozen in place. It didn't move, it just stared. Then, it slowly faded away into the mist. I went back there the next morning. The grave where I had seen the entity had no name on its headstone. Only a single sentence was carved into the stone. "Those who look back never return alone." Even today, if I ever hear a familiar voice call my name deep in the night, I stop. But I never look back. Dear listeners, tonight's 5 cemetery stories end here. These stories were presented in narrative form, inspired by real burial grounds, urban legends, and mysterious experiences reported by real people. Perhaps these were all just coincidences. Perhaps not. But if you ever happen to walk past an old cemetery deep in the night, and if you feel like someone is silently watching you, then leaving that place quickly might just be the best decision you ever make. I'm your host for True Horror Vault. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please give this video a like. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the True Horror Vault channel, and hit the bell icon, so you never miss another spine-chilling horror story. We will return in the next episode, with stories inspired by even darker, more mysterious, and far more terrifying true events. Until then, keep your doors and windows locked. And before you turn off the lights to sleep, just make sure, in the darkness of your room, you are truly alone.